Welcome to Herbal Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbal Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbal Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so happy to have as our guest, Mr. Stephen Horne. Stephen is an internationally recognized registered herbalist, iridologist, and natural healer. He is a professional member and past president of the American Herbalist Guild and a certified comprehensive iridology instructor. Stephen's passion for helping people has led him to write and teach about natural health for over 40 years. He is the co-author of The Modern Herbal Dispensary, a popular book about herbal medicine making, and he is the author of Strategies for Health, a comprehensive guide to healing, which we will be reviewing today. So thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen Horne.
Yeah, and thank you for having me, Ellen. I'm really happy to talk to you about this stuff today.
So I'd like to just veer off herbalism for a minute, because I think you're really unique in being an iridologist instructor as well. What is certified comprehensive iridology instructor? What does that entail?
Well, I've been on the board also of the International Iridology Practitioners Association, and that organization was founded for a similar purpose as the American Herbalist Guild, to try to elevate the practice of iridology and put it in line more with the research on iridology done by the medical doctors out of Europe. So when you complete their program, you become a certified comprehensive iridology instructor because you learn all of the latest terminology and iris anatomy and other things that make you more professional in that particular field.
Well, we should probably do another show specifically on that, because I just gave several lectures on eye health in various places. And I actually went deeply into iridology because I studied iridology with Dr. Bernard Jensen. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yep.
And I have found it so amazingly effective. I really think it should be something that's taught to every health professional, because it's a non-invasive, pre-symptomatic way to assess different areas of health.
Yeah, one of the things about iridology that's really important to understand is most of what you're seeing in the iris is genetic. So what you're looking at in the iris is the genetic predispositions a person has, or in other words, their constitution. And I think that is an important aspect of natural medicine that is missed in the modern medicine, because they look at the disease, but they don't look at the constitution of the person who has the disease. And in traditional medicine, that's one of the more important things we do, is we look at the person, not just the illness they have, but the person themselves. And when we base the therapy that we use on the person more than on the disease the person has. And so iridology helps you see what underlying weaknesses a person might be aggravating by their diet and lifestyle, and helps you therefore help them make changes that support those weak body systems or processes that go on in their body, thereby improving their overall health and helping to the body to heal the way it's supposed to.
Well, everything you just said, although we started off with the concept of iridology, also is part of what you talk about in your book, Strategies for Health.
Yeah, that's right. It's a fundamental concept that separates not just the fact that we use herbs instead of using drugs, for example, or we use massage or other non-invasive body techniques instead of surgery or whatever. It's not just the difference in the modalities we use, it's the difference in the philosophy behind the way we apply those modalities. You can still use orthodox medicine and be into natural health, just realizing that you're thinking in a different way about how you take care of your body. Orthodox, when I say orthodox medicine, I'm talking about, modern medicine.
Okay, so wait a minute. Wait, we're gonna define those terms, because you
Yes.
already threw out the term correctly, in my opinion, the use of the word traditional medicine, and I am a stickler about that. So, what would you call what we're talking about in terms of modern, mainstream, allopathic? That's one conventional. Those are good words, versus traditional medicine.
Yeah. Well, traditional medicine was very holistic. It was based on a philosophy of life that looked at a big picture, and there was a spiritual foundation to it too, because it involved not just disease, but how a person lived in harmony with nature, in harmony with other people, and it looked at the big picture. I mean, if you look at like native healers, they were also the family counselors. They looked at the person's overall health, and there was also this concept that health was not just material, but that there was a life essence, an energetic aspect of life. And different philosophies called that, something different, like in Chinese medicine, qi or qi or prana or spirit. Native Americans talk about, spirit. Traditional medicine talked about the vital force. We recognized that there was something to life other than this materialism that is so common today. And you're seeing this according to like patterns of problems, not just specific things. It's a difference really between reductionistic thinking and holistic thinking. Reductionistic thinking like tries to zero in on the little part and study and examine and break it down into smaller and smaller pieces. But the holistic thing zooms back and kind of tries to get an overall sense of the big picture. And one of the things that traditional medicine uses is energetic models. We were talking about before we came on the show, like the 5-element theory in Chinese medicine or the 4-element theory in traditional Western medicine. And these allowed them to see bigger patterns in what was going on and see how things interrelated with each other rather than just all the little pieces. And when you get good at this, it's like you learn to see both the forest and the trees. You can use the information from the reductionistic studies and models and everything, but you're able to see where they fit in better from an overall arching pattern. And I don't know, I wasn't quite ready to talk about that, but that is a really important subject for me, because I think that part of our brain that does that is way undertrained in modern society. We don't train people to think that way. In fact, it's discouraged. And I think part of the reason why that's the case is because people who learn to think that way tend to think for themselves rather than just go along with the herd.
That's a really good point. And in your book, Strategies for Health, you really do discuss a lot about that. It's a beautiful little chart that I'm looking here. It's called negative thinking versus positive thinking. And while that's a thought in terms of how we approach life very often, we find that people can move their thought processes consciously by looking at what you're talking about here. Like you say, here's an example, thinking about what you don't have versus being grateful for what you do have. That sounds pretty easy, but it's amazing how many people who do suffer, with long-term chronic illness, when you do talk to them about what's going on in their minds, you often see that they're focusing on what they don't have. And then those people, like, let's think about these amazing, let's say, athletes who have one leg, and you see them, when you talk to that kind of person, they'll say, well, I have one good leg.
Yeah.
And the mechanical one also works. This is great.
Exactly. That's a big part of it, because when you get caught in, and it's something that kind of bothers me that's being fostered in modern society, it's this victimhood mentality that I'm a helpless victim, blah, blah, blah. I found in doing healing work that what we believe tends to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Our belief basically structures the way we see the world, and it narrows what we're able to see. So if I believe something, I will tend to only accumulate evidence and see the things that agree with my belief, and I'll miss all the stuff that doesn't. And so if I believe, for example, that I'm a sickly person and that I'm a victim of life and whatever, germs are going to attack me no matter what I do or that kind of thing, then my belief will put me in that mindset. And when someone presents me with something, hey, if you do this, you're going to be a healthier person. You do that, you can overcome this illness. My mind will tend to reject it just simply because it doesn't align with what I believe. And I've found that to be a struggle with helping many people, is they can't just open their mind to believe that maybe there is an answer when medicine says there isn't an answer.
Well, of course, the entrenched, let's say, mainstream, conventional, allopathic, modern, we can use those terms about what we call medicine, and we don't use the word traditional, as I notice you don't use the word traditional, because it's really a basically kind of new system, yes, not a thousands of year old system, but it's very much based on, wait till something happens and then take a drug or right, surgery in the end. But it's supposed to be like nothing having to do with what you do and what you can do to really, like a doctor might say, eat healthy, but then in an 8-minute visit, if you're lucky to get that long a visit, they just write a prescription.
Right. There's this, it's one of the things that's a problem in that model is it looks at the presenting symptom as the problem. And there's no effort to go and dig in deeper and say, why is this happening? And a good example is a blood pressure, which I'm writing an article about right now. There's a whole bunch of different things that contribute to a person's blood pressure elevating. And if you're just taking a drug that goes into the chemical messaging systems of the body and tells them, lower the blood pressure, that will work temporarily, but the body is elevating the blood pressure for a reason. And because the body has intelligence, it will realize it's being duped, and it will start trying to find a way to work around the influence of the drug, and the medication doesn't work, stops working. And so the doctor changes the medication and tries to trick the body another way. But they never look at, is the person magnesium deficient? Are they getting the vitamin C or vitamin D3 or the vitamin K2 that they need? Are they under a lot of stress? Are their kidneys working well? Because if your kidneys aren't functioning effectively, that can elevate your blood pressure. There's different factors going on here, and they're never pausing to say, why is the person's blood pressure going up, and what can we do to fix the cause?
That's a good suggestion, because what's so wonderful, I know, how long have you been involved in natural medicine and herbal medicine?
Well, I really started getting heavily involved in it in 1980, but I dabbled in it for, 5 or 6 years before that. And before that, when I was in my teens, I became really interested in outdoor survival and that sort of thing. And so I was very interested in edible and medicinal wild plants. And I was fascinated by the uses that Native Americans had to plants. But I didn't really start using that until I was in my early 20s.
Well, it's so clear. So quite a while is the answer.
Quite a while, yes.
Not yesterday, because you've been writing this, you've been teaching about it so many years. And most people in the natural medicine community will have heard of you and your work. So it's really wonderful to have you on today. And let me introduce you again at this time. Listeners, you are listening to Herbal Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest is registered herbalist and iridologist Stephen Horne. And you can find him at Stephen Horne, that's Stephen and HORNE.com, or also other websites as well. And he teaches people about natural health and also how to become involved in being a health provider of natural medicine. We're also looking at his books. One is called Modern Herbal Dispensary, and another one is Strategies for Health. And that book on energy, is that a book in and of itself, Stephen?
No, that is a book I'm going to write. That's
okay.
One of my upcoming projects. The energetics of our herbs and essential oils as well.
Okay, coming attractions. So once
Yes.
you have that out, get in touch and we'll do shows on that, because fabulous charts. Oh my God, I love that book. So in strategies, you really go very, very deeply into so many things. And I bet every single listener knows this, that just taking a drug for a specific disease does not make you healthy. And the horrible part about it is, like you talked about, blood pressure. So perhaps they give you a blood pressure drug and it does a good job of bringing that number down, but it does not make you healthier because they all have this vast array of adverse effects. So in the end, you're worse off.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because the body, health is a balance. The body has this balance called homeostasis, which is the maintenance of normal conditions in the extracellular fluid, or what has been called the biological terrain. It's sort of like if you're growing plants, the thing you look at is the soil. Is the soil have the minerals it needs? How much moisture does it need? Does it have enough organic matter in it? Is it too compacted or is it too sandy? And by improving the quality of the soil and making sure the plant has the water and sunlight and things it needs, you raise a healthy plant. You wouldn't take and look at a plant that was withering and because it's not getting enough water and say, oh, it needs a drug. Okay. You'd give it water. You wouldn't look at a plant where the leaves are yellowing because there's not enough magnesium in the soil and give it a drug. Magnesium. You would look at the signs and see that. So as long as the right mix of nutrients and oxygen and waste removal from the cellular processes is going on so that the extracellular fluid has the right terrain to keep cells healthy, those cells will remain healthy. And so it's about identifying how that body has gone out of balance with homeostasis. Well, the body has all these signaling systems trying to keep itself in balance. And when there's a problem, it creates symptoms trying to balance out difficulties it's having. And when you look at that symptom and you see the symptom as the problem, it's really like seeing the warning indicator light on your dashboard that something's wrong with your engine as the problem, instead of seeing it as an indication that you need to look and find out what's going on in your engine and get it fixed. And that, it just doesn't work, because if you go in and tamper with those signaling systems to try to artificially balance the homeostasis, it knocks other things out of balance, and nothing gets fixed.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Like, you can bring down that blood pressure number, right, but it doesn't move you into a state of better health.
Exactly. It's just pushing one system in a certain direction, and that system affects others. And then what happens is you wind up taking more medications and more medications and more medications, trying to fix all the problems that spin off of tampering with that in the first place. Whereas
it's so true. You look at something like you talking about. Well, let's talk about high blood pressure, since you're in the midst of writing it.
Yeah.
What would be, if somebody did want to, and of course they should always speak to their physician first, but what would be a natural strategy that they could bring their blood pressure down? Are there herbs that could be helpful, or exercises, or what would be the strategy to do? And, I tell people to make a bargain with themselves. They can try the natural strategies for a period of time. And then if they feel like they're going to need the medication, they can always use it later.
Right. Well, if they haven't started on medication, they can just start experimenting with things that will work. If they are on medication, they shouldn't abruptly discontinue it. They should start experimenting with what works, and as it starts to work, they can gradually back off the medication.
Well, they can also speak to their doctor, right? They can speak to their doctor as the blood pressure came down. You can say, wow, it's so low now, can I try weaning off? And if your doctor won't work with you at that point, I would say fire the doctor, because
and find a different doctor.
You are the employer. of your healthcare provider.
Boy, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's one of the things I think. You're hiring him. He's not hiring you. So let's just start with some simple things.
Great.
About 70% of the population is deficient in magnesium. And magnesium is necessary for muscles to relax. And your arteries have little muscles in them. And if you don't have enough magnesium, the muscles can't relax. And muscles exchange calcium and magnesium ions in order to expand and contract. So one of the drugs they use is a calcium channel blocker to block calcium from entering in the cell. And typically, the natural thing is just give the person more magnesium so the calcium and magnesium are in proper balance. Another thing, inflammation in the lining of the arteries is a big cause of that, because inflammation always causes swelling of tissues. And it also interferes with the nitric oxide signaling that allows the arteries to dilate in response to the body's need for blood. And so that inflammation of the arteries is a big problem, partly because of all of the junk we put into our bodies that irritates it, but also because you need vitamin C, vitamin D3, and vitamin K2 are some of the major vitamins that act as antioxidants to protect that lining on the blood vessels and keep it from getting irritated. And again, a lot of people are deficient in D3, deficient in K2. They're not eating fresh fruits and vegetables, so they don't get the vitamin C they need. And just some of these simple nutrients will often help. Another thing is getting your stress under control. I hope you don't mind me to be a little personal, but I had a vasectomy a few years ago. And when I went in, my blood pressure was like 190 over something. And she says, "You're nervous, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah," because my blood pressure was normally normal. And there are a couple of times when my wife, who studied to be a CNA, has checked my blood pressure when I'm stressed, and it's like 130 or 135. And I said, "Just give me a second. I'll take a few deep breaths and calm down and relax." And it drops right back in normal range. Blood pressure will elevate sometimes 20 or 30 points just because they walked into the doctor's office and they're nervous.
Right. That's actually a well-known phenomenon.
Yeah. So taking some herbs like linden or whatever that help you relax. And then you can also improve your nitric oxide signaling with L-arginine and beetroot, because the natural nitrates in beetroot and Swiss chard and those vegetables will enhance the nitric oxide signaling that helps your blood vessels respond dynamically to the need for more blood. Like there's some research shows people drinking some raw beet juice like an hour before the exercise, and they get less fatigued and they don't have as much muscle soreness afterwards, simply because the natural nitrates in the beet juice go in and they allow the blood vessels to better dilate in the increased need for blood in the exercise, and the person has less fatigue and they're able to exercise longer with something that simple. And that's where people just don't have all this information, because medical doctors don't study this. They're just trained to dispense the drugs rather than really get in and understand all of these things that nature provides for us to help us stay healthy.
And there is so much. I know in your new book, and all of this is in this book, Strategies for Health, and it's very in-depth. There's a lot to this book. And you're talking about things that people may not learn other places. Like one that's interesting is I'm looking at a chart that you have about cell pH and the voltage. Now, what do you mean by the cell voltage? Because that might be new to some people.
Yeah, well, if you look at a battery, all right, all a battery is two different substances, one with an acidic pH and one with an alkaline pH, and that have this semiconductor in between them. So when you hook the wires to the end of the battery, electrons flow from the alkaline side to the acidic side. And so what pH really is, it means potential of hydrogen. hydrogen readily gives up electrons. And when hydrogen gives up its one electron, it is just a proton, which has a positive charge. And an electron has a negative charge. So when your system is alkaline, it means that there are more electrons than protons, and electrons create electrical energy, which allows the body to carry on electrical activities. As the electrical energy diminishes, the body becomes increasingly acidic. There is not the electrical energy present to allow the body to do what it needs to do to heal, and you become increasingly sick.
So that's just so interesting that you have that whole entire description in this book. It's full. It's a great primer for about what's going on in your body, along with specific steps that you can take to bring things back into balance, which is, really comprehensive.
Yeah, well, it's really the result of many, many years of trying to understand the things that are going on and find simple ways of explaining them. I always, there's a saying my dad had, I kind of modified it, but it's that the philosophies of the world are simply profound, but the truth is profoundly simple. So
that's a good one.
So I always look for the things that really, when you look at them, they make good, solid, common, simple sense. It's from another book I plan to write. I took a class in experimental learning and teaching at the university, and we learned a whole way of learning and teaching that has influenced my entire life. And one of the things we were taught about is the law of the simplest case. That before you can solve the complex problem, you have to boil the problem down to its most fundamental elements and look at it in its simplest case. And the example they used was, if I want to know how long it's going to take me to get from here to there, I have to know two critical things before I can even begin to solve the problem. I need to know the distance, and I need to know the speed which I'm going to be traveling.
Well, that's, really interesting. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I really support people to visit your website at stephenhorne.com, and they can easily find that book, Strategies for Health. It's very, very comprehensive. So I want to thank you so much for being our guest today, Stephen, on Herbal Yours.
Well, thank you for having me. That time went fast, didn't it?
I know it is. And I want to thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbal Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbal Yours. Until then, stay healthy.